Well, good afternoon, Cleveland. It's fantastic to be back here. It was a little bit of a late night. Oh, they came. Oh, my God. Is there something on fire? I don't understand what's happening here. Wait a minute.
For the ambiance.
Okay, all right. So I saw a poll recently. I mean, you shouldn't really pay much attention to what the general public say about anything as a rule. But I've met them. They're not that bright. But I saw a poll about the Metaverse. It said 80% of people know what the Metaverse is. I wanted to test it against this audience, but I literally can't see anybody. So if you think you know roughly what the Metaverse is, just say yes. So who knows what the Metaverse is? No. This might not be the panel for you. I'm not. Look, so 80% of people said they knew what the Metaverse is, but when they were challenged, could you explain the Metaverse to another fit person? That number fell to like 6%, and they were lying. It was just like American overconfidence. Like no one knows what it is. So the point is, we can't really have a conversation about it with interesting people without a sort of rough working definition of. So for the purposes. I should say, by the way, any mentions of cryptocurrency during this session are for entertainment purposes only and should not be considered financial advice or inducements to purchase any particular securities. So they just told us that back. So a working definition of the metaverse then would be, the metaverse, broadly speaking, is really three things. It's some kind of virtual world where transactions are going to take place. It's some kind of property that can be transacted. And it's some kind of owners of those property, what Yaron Lanier used to call economic avatars, who can execute those transactions. There's those three components. Virtual worlds have been around for absolutely ever, right? The property for these virtual worlds, tokens and non-fungible tokens, I mean, that's kind of new, but, it's sort of interesting. The bit that's missing is that last bit about the owners. The bit that's missing is the identity bit. And when I was asking people about this earlier in the week, somebody said, well, the thing is, the Web3 people, oh wait, I forgot what Web3 is. We'll come back to that in a minute. So the Web3 people don't know what identity is, which is true, I think. Actually, the Web3 people, I don't think know what Web3 is either, judging by, do you see yet another $100 million hack this morning, right, Horizon. So these people are funny, aren't they? It's like, code is law, we don't need no stinking badges, caveat emptor, and then when the money gets stolen, well, call my mom, where's the FBI, I tell them, stuff off, you made your bed. So anyway, the point is, none of this will work without identity, so I needed people to come and talk about how that's all going to work. The metaverse is obviously a reputation economy, it's not a physical economy, none of us are physically in it, as far as I know. So all you care about these people is their reputations. You don't care who they really are, right? So let's start. So bachelor number one, could you give me your Twitter handle and tell me what your company does?
So I'm Johnny Howell.
No, you're not playing the game. I see your Twitter.
Okay.
Who you really are? We're in the metaverse now, Johnny.
Yes.
Look,
so it is
your Twitter handle.
At Johnny Howell.
Thank you very much.
On Twitter. I'm co-founder of Disco. We are trying to do some digital identity, decentralized identity for the metaverse. I think I probably qualify as one of the Web3 people. So I'll do my best to represent a little bit of that perspective. I'm a product designer by trade, so very much come from a user-centered design background and kind of view things through that lens.
Bachelorette number one. What's your Twitter handle?
Heather Vescent. My Twitter handle is Heather Vescent, and I'm a futurist and also the executive director of IDPro right now.
And you're a proper futurist, like not just like making stuff up like me.
Yeah, I actually have a degree. I have a master's of science in strategic foresight. There's actually a degree, and I know and utilize about 30 to 50 different methodologies to extrapolate possibilities into the future.
Cool.
And let me just put a plug about the future really quick.
Why, is it all that?
Well, no, a lot of people think there's one future, which is why people like predictions. They want certainty about the one future. But really, the future is this interesting realm, kind of like the metaverse, of pure possibility. So it's not like there's just one future, there's many futures.
You're from California, right, Heather?
Of course I am.
Okay, good.
And the 90s. I'm straight out of the 90s, too.
Bachelor number 2, what's your Twitter handle and what do you do?
Gopal Padinjaruveetil, Twitter handle at PK Gopala. I'm the Chief Information Security Officer at AAA. So if you've been living in this universe, you should have heard about AAA. It's a 120-year-old company that's been a member-centric company. So I'm proud to be working for an organization that's been around for 120 years, protecting people on the physical highway.
Yeah, which we won't need anymore in the future, of course. So it's, but he's got his CV with him in case anyone is looking around. Bachelorette number 2, what's your Twitter handle and what do you do?
At Katryna Dow, and that's with a real K and a real Y. And I'm the founder of Meeco. And I guess we've been working on the infrastructure to bridge this existing world with the world we're heading to. So I have a foot in both camps with building the infrastructure between the systems and ways that we communicate digitally now and where we're heading in this new omniverse.
Let's talk about the problems that you're dealing with. Before we come back to like how people here could approach actually fixing some of this stuff, let's just spend a couple of minutes talking about the problems, right? So in this kind of proto-emergent metaverse, what is it that's going wrong? When people say Web3, people don't really understand. They're sort of right. So let's just talk a little about the problem space first. So does one of you want to kind of illustrate some of the problems that we're facing?
I think one of the most challenging things and a call to action for us is what's happening really for kids that are already living in this other place. So I think, if you've got any kids at home that are in the gaming space, they're already living between this physical and a virtual world. And a lot of what we've been talking about this week has really been solving problems, mostly for grown-ups in the workplace, across healthcare, financial services. But I think if there is one really strong call to action, is we've got a really short period of time to get some of the scaffolding and some of the safety and security in place for a generation that are already living in another place.
Right, that's a real and pressing need because they're already there. We can't even stop people who are under 13 logging into Pornhub, or is that 18? I get mixed up. Facebook's the 13 one, isn't it? But we can't even do that at the moment. So how are we going to protect these legions of kids who are already online in that new space? We haven't even started on this problem, have we?
Well, coming from the inside of the metaverse, where I spend most of my time in the kind of the Ethereum space and other related blockchain space, the thing that I've seen is, a lot of times, I think maybe a couple years ago, blockchains and decentralized identity, we talked about it in terms of using blockchains and decentralized identity for the traditional world. Like, how can we improve login systems in Web 2 and stuff by adopting some of these decentralized identifiers and things like that? There's a whole other class of problems that are happening in the metaverse, which is that we need an identity system for metaverse problems that are kind of unique. And a lot of those are based on game theoretical systems, right? And this is where so the problems that I see most pressing in the metaverse right now are things like anti-Sybil protection, because so much of what people are trying to build in the metaverse context relies on these big coordination problems and these novel economic incentive designs. And a lot of that is under threat by pseudonymous identities and bots and things like that. And so that is one of the biggest pressing problems that I think there's teams out there working on proof of humanity and trying to create registries that can ensure Sybil protection. And we could have a debate up here around whether Sybil resistance is probabilistic or deterministic and things like that. And those are the types of interesting problems that I don't think we've engaged with in Web 2 much because of the way those systems are designed. And in the Web 3 context, there's this new kind of class of identity problems that I think are really interesting that we are, I think, starting to make some inroads on.
So there are social problems, there are economic problems, there are serious problems. which boil down to the fact that nobody knows who anybody is in this. Like this coordinated inauthentic behavior is only possible because nobody knows who anybody is, right? So so the point is, the metaverse might sound a bit kind of made up to you. It's not. It's really happening, and there are real problems there now already. Okay, so broadly speaking, if that's right, we have the Web3, which is the tokens and DeFi stuff that's moving around, and tokens, that's a real thing, right? That's going somewhere. Oh, sorry, I keep forgetting you've only got the two microphones. So there was the budget problems earlier on. We were down to the two microphones. I fought as hard as I could for the last two. So.
Yeah, I think tokens are important because they're a way to, or in theory, the dream of tokens, whether they are fungible tokens, which are like monetary tokens, or the ERC 721 token, which is an identity token that could be connected to an object for ownership, is an idea of like, could these tokens be used to allow interoperable commerce or interoperable identities between virtual worlds? And that's this whole, I mean, riffing on one of the challenges I think we're going to have.
I think that was his trigger word. I'm really sorry. We had the list of trigger words, and was it commerce we weren't supposed to say? I don't know. He didn't. I'm so sorry.
I thought it was Web 5.
Oh, yeah, no, don't say that either.
Yeah, but I think it's like we need to be able to not just have the virtual worlds be built within their own systems, which is what we've had now. We've had with like Second Life, and I think that's one of the concerns with Facebook and their digital identity model is the idea of using these different tokens, whether they're fungible or non-fungible, is that they'll be able to move fluidly between multiple worlds, so you'll be able to take digital identity and your objects from one world to other worlds.
So to just stick on your word, to do real commerce, you have to have property and property rights. That's fundamental to it. So virtual worlds by themselves don't do that, but tokens bring those into the virtual world.
And prove that you can actually own it versus like it's owned within like a script within like, you know, a company town, whereas like you can't take the script outside of that company town. And that's why people have done like sneaky things like trying to sell stuff or frequent flyer miles or, you know, like sell World of Warcraft objects or gaming objects on other kinds of systems in order to get out of that company script model. And so that's what I think a lot of folks are trying to, the dream of NFTs and the ERC 721 token is that it will kind of be able to bridge an interoperable commerce layer through the metaverse that isn't just limited to one virtual world or even a virtual world. It could go into the digital Web 2 world too.
But the point is it's real business, right? Because the people in the audience, when you say NFTs, they're thinking about those stupid pictures of chimpanzees with sunglasses on that Paris Hilton was selling. Like, no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about real business up here with the thing. But that's only part of the story. The fact that you have real property, you know, because to your point about incentives, that doesn't give you a real market, like a working market. It doesn't just depend on the property, it depends on who owns it. And there's essentially two ways we can fix that problem as far as I can see from my kind of inexpert position, like outside the metaverse. I'm more focused on the AI-powered quantum blockchain in the cloud at the moment, but the metaverse is another way forward, I know. There's essentially two ways we can solve that problem. We can take things that are in the metaverse, tokens, and we can repurpose those to solve some of the identity problems. And that's the Vitalik Buterin soul-bound NFTs kind of approach. Or we can take the stuff these people are doing, which is real digital identity, and we can find a way to move that into the metaverse.
But
that, in essence,
a hybrid model, like why just take the best from the work with NFTs and the Ethereum tokens and stable coins and stuff, take the best of that and take the best of DIDs and VCs. It's not either or, it's like figure out the best use case for each one of those things to be used in.
Okay, but when I say import the stuff these people are working on into the metaverse, I of course mean verifiable credentials, right? So what do we have to do to make this work kind of in the metaverse?
So you may be wondering why a gray-haired old man from a 120-year-old company.
I'm here because of diversity.
Yeah, so we started this when there were 2,000 cars on the road and 17 million horses on the road and safety and all those things. So we believe in the DNA of safety. So we believe that as we move from the physical highways to the super highways, we have a role to play. I just came back from India, and I'm so happy that we had Sanjay in the last panel. So when I see India and Aadhaar, what magic VC or a verified credential is doing to 1.3 billion people in terms of Aadhaar, UPI, India Stack, paperless, and all those things, I'm saying huge. I don't think that a government issues VC is going to be a reality in US. So in 2017, AAA started on this journey about creating a virtual credential for our 62 million members in US. And we started with a few partners. We started with Trusted Key and as the backend, and Prakash is now with Microsoft. Amit they sold that to Workday, and so we started this journey. We are now restarting this journey about a virtual world. So we talked about this concept of a carbon identity, which is us in the physical world, and the silicon identity, which is the whole metaverse and devices, that silicon. We need to be, there is no virtual without the carbon. The virtual world cannot exist without the real universe, right? So we need to be able to, I think OpenID has been talking about transforming physical credentials into the virtual credentials. What we are now thinking is not only transforming the physical credentials into the virtual credentials, but transposing the ability to move from one world to other, right? Just going back and forth. And the bridge, I think, she's been talking about the bridge, and what we are talking about from a business world, right? I mean, there's commercial uses for 17-year-old kids to do fun stuff in this, but we are now talking about, we are a business, how do we leverage business and VC in that world? Because the business metrics have to be in the physical world. I mean, that's measured in the physical world. So we need to be able to have that when we are talking about VC, and what we are building right now is that not only the VC for the business and for our members, but also a kind of a broker, right? As we are moving from one world to another world, you need to be able to collect the metrics of what is happening, who's doing what, and how much of monetization is happening, and all those things. So what we are actually looking beyond virtual credentials is building that brokering, and the bridging is what we are trying to build today, because that is important. And the other thing is that the definition, whether from the OpenID, which was published yesterday, and also the W3C data model that is published in April, we are not talking about a tamper-proof credentials. What we are now talking about, because that's gone, I mean, we are not going to get a tamper-proof credentials. What we are talking about is a tamper-evident credential. So that is something that we are working towards, is you can't have a tamper-proof. We thought that crypto is going to do that, cryptography is going to do that, but we are now looking into how do we provide a tamper-evident credential. Is that what we are looking into?
Okay, so just to recap at the halfway mark then. So Metaverse, it's a real thing, real businesses are looking at it. There are real problems to solve. We have ideas about what to do about the identities. We have the ideas of what to do about the tokens. We have the ideas about what to do about the verifiable credentials. So what is the organizing principle for all of those things? Like for when these good people actually venture into the Metaverse, how are they actually going to manage all of these things?
So I think the magic word you want me to say is wallet.
Yes, that's exactly
and
it's like a mentalist act.
Yeah, exactly. I picked that up from you. So let's say wallet, let's say agent, let's say container. I mean, I think we may land on some terminology and hopefully have a shared understanding of what that means. And I think it's really important to acknowledge, sort of on the last day of Identiverse, as we did at the beginning, is that a lot of these things, wallets, agents, containers, are possible now, and Anka said this in the last panel, on the shoulders of giants. And so it's just, we happen to be at a particular point right now where much of the work that has been happening with people in this audience, sort of over the last decade, it's a combination of the technology, where society is going, the need for a digital acceleration post-COVID. We've got all these things coming together, and this idea of wallet is something people can get their heads around. Yeah, they understand physical wallet. It's not so hard to understand digital wallet. Some of those wallets will perform very straightforward things, maybe opening a door at work, and some of those wallets will perform extraordinary complex tasks with business rules or act as a smart agent. And I think the key thing that we I hope, are starting to achieve is an understanding of what's the cryptographic security that we agree on, what are some of the principles in terms of interoperability, how do we move between networks, and then we have this whole new world of existing world, new world, what are the services and what are the new opportunities across commerce, across service delivery that can be enabled through that container.
So what are some of the things you're actually building?
So some of the things
So
that
I meant Johnny for a second there. So.
Yeah. So one.
Just to emphasize Katryna's point.
Right.
This isn't like hypothetical stuff. You guys are actually building
happening
this stuff.
really right now.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So when we think of a wallet, I mean, it's a convenient word for a kind of an aggregation of concepts. So the way we're handling things is, we're building for, I guess, kind of a bit of our strategy and our insight is that one of the great things that crypto and DeFi and Web3 and all of these things have given us is the opportunity to have a user base, millions of users, which, in the grand scheme of things isn't that much, but for, startups and for a place to play and experiment with these ideas is very important, that already custody private keys. And they have the infrastructure to do it. You don't have to get them to download an app. They all already have it. It's called MetaMask or some of these other wallets, right? So that's a wallet that stores your keys. The verifiable credentials that we use don't necessarily need to be stored in the wallet.
Right.
They can be stored somewhere else,
yeah.
right? And then you have your assets, right? Which is, your tokens. Those are actually stored on a blockchain, right? They're not actually in your wallet, which is so we have like kind of three things happening, and the keys control, where your credentials are. Those can be in a separate place. You can use multiple wallets with the same keys. They're just interfaces to interact with your keys. So you kind of get this like whole mix and match thing. We're trying to unify that experience a bit without reducing the autonomy of the user, right? So we don't want to lock people into our platform. We simply, we take a very heavy UX approach, and we're banking on the fact that we have no technical lock-in, and we are simply trying to lock you into our user experience because it's the best way to do this, right? And that's our bet. But yeah, I think the wallets is a convenient term, but when you get into the details, especially in the kind of crypto Web3 world, you're actually talking about a set of technologies that all come together in a singular experience.
But for the consumers to start using it, I mean, you're right, but for consumers to start using this sort of stuff, it has to make that kind of step into, and I mean, wallet is a pretty convenient, but what do people actually need to be able to do with this stuff?
Well, I think one of the challenges that's been like, why are NFTs so adopted and get so much hype in the media, and like VCs and DIDs and like kind of like VCs and DIDs have real value, and NFTs are like collectibles. And this is one of the adoption problems, is that we really need like collectibles, and excitement and hype attracts the mainstream consumer. And so we need to find a way to have those same folks find the value and the convenience of having a verified credential in their pocket that they can use.
But there's two different kinds of things there, I think, isn't there? So, for example, why would I want one of these AAA credentials? That solves the problem that Eve put forward yesterday. She said, the most important credential of all is just proving you're a real person, right? His credential does that, right? I mean, you check they're real people,
absolutely.
right?
So that is the key, is that how many wallets do you carry, right? I mean, so that's what the thinking that the way that we are thinking is, you need to have a way to onboard a user into getting a credential. And then you also need to do proofing. I mean, we can't be like Facebook, where a dog can be a 17-year-old girl or something, right? So you need to have that real proofing. The second thing is you need to be able to prove that you are a human, because there's so many bots out there, right? So first thing is you need to prove that you're a human. Then you need to have some proofing of your identity, and then you need to be onboarded, and then you need to have, if you lose your phone or if you lose you need to change your wallet or something, right? You need to have some mechanism. So you need to be able to make this a reality. This whole thing needs to be built so that the user experience is seamless, right? I mean, that's what, so the access of just, I got a wallet, can I transact, can I make a claim, can I get access to something? That's an easy problem to solve, but building that ecosystem and the interoperable ecosystem where we don't want to force you to be in our ecosystem. If there's a healthcare ecosystem, that is where we want you to be interoperate with many other ecosystems. And I think Gain is talking about that. That's exactly the model.
No, and I can see you might well use a Gain identity to obtain the variable credential. Yeah. But where I was going with the question to Heather, because you're saying like getting that kind of adoption. So in my head, I just say there's two kind of things my credential might allow me to transact, which is basically stupid tokens, pictures of chimpanzees with sunglasses on that are inherently worthless, and useful tokens like tickets for a baseball game or something like that. The point is, there is a real economic model for tokens in the metaverse, which has nothing to do with stupid pictures of chimpanzees with sunglasses on, right? Or am I barking up the wrong tree on this?
I think you're right, but it's the hype. It's what attracts someone to use it. And I think this is very frustrating to those of us in the space that have worked on this tech for so long.
I want to check with you. Seriously, who chose their investment strategies for this year on the basis of what Paris Hilton and Matt Damon said? Can we just see some hands up in this audience? No, I think you're wrong. I think these are sensible people.
Well, but the folks in this audience are different
not the
from the
target
audience
market.
that's on Twitter.
Yeah, that's
so I think like people look to influencers, they look to guides to help them understand the path forward. And we already know people aren't rational. They don't pick the logical choice. Those in this room, of course, do, because we are thinkers. We build technology.
You don't have to flatter them.
But I'm just saying this, and I was like, this is why it's important to have a diversity of viewpoints in building this, to be able to understand the user experience, the motivations. Like, we are talking about usable functionality. Some people are using NFTs for proving popularity and in ways that we just don't really understand.
I'd love to jump in here and maybe take it back to the existing world and the pathway forward and some of those incentives. I think one of the big shifts is realizing the value that can be created by bringing the employee, the patient, the student, the citizen into the value chain. So what we're starting to see, whether or not you look at it from a tokenomics point of view, a collaboration point of view, a cost of service point of view, we've got this extended paradigm that we've spoken about a lot over the last couple of days, is what happens if you're able to add another empowered actor into this value chain. And I think one of the accelerants in the current world, and we've got some really interesting case studies that show real productivity gains, commercial productivity gains, that prove that when you bring an employee into that onboarding, and yes, there are all sorts of fun things happening that are part of the hype and the excitement that maybe capture attention, but there are also some really grounded economic fundamental shifts around how everyday commerce works right now that are measurable, processes that reduce from days to minutes. The minute you're able to, allow a member to prove something about themselves in a really efficient way.
Yeah, but that starts. We were supposed not to talk about legal liability, so let's just steer away. Because the thing, he won't answer. But if I meet you on Match.com, right, and I want to impress you, so I give you my verifiable credential from AAA. It turns out I'm actually a serial killer. Are they going to accept any legal liability for that? So no, of course not.
No, but
so why would you accept
your
their
NFT
credential?
with your classes, your ape glasses, that's way cooler than your verifiable credentials from
like
AAA.
those, right? Yeah.
Look, I'm just arguing against the challenges that we have in this industry. If we just pretend that the best technology will win, we're going to lose. Culture eats the technology superior solution for breakfast. Like, it doesn't matter that our solution is better.
We have to have Paris Hilton on board.
It's the culture. We have to appeal to the dominant culture that is going to take it to where we're going to go. And that's why I'm talking, and I'm actually taking seriously some of these Web3 things, which we might otherwise poo-poo or say it's crazy, or how could you believe any of that at all? I mean, we said that about the web in the 90s. And we said that about Web 2.0 and the web.crash. And so we got to realize this is a recreation of the world in 2022 and beyond. And those of us who've been around, if we're not aware of that, we're going to lose our relevance.
Okay, because they're yelling at us on the clock. So can I just ask each of you just to very quickly just tell the audience that what you're doing is real, it's a real business, the metaverse isn't stupid.
Yeah. My last point here will be about, I guess the triviality of Web3 as it looks right now, which is the stuff we're talking about, DIDs and VCs, is what is going to allow us to take us, the metaverse, Web3, whatever you want to call it, to a real, turn it into a real valuable thing. We have a ceiling on the amount of types of coordination games we can play without knowing who each other are. And that doesn't mean knowing everything about the other person, and it's probabilistic for any given interaction. So like, we can't do under-collateralized loans. You talk to these DeFi teams, that's what they want to do, but they don't have ability to do it.
Yeah.
But, so what do? They start doing this crazy financial engineering with all of these smart contracts. You want people that want to build out these NFT marketplaces, but then they get bogged down on knowing whether or not the person submitting the art is the actual artist. You get DAOs that want to do these complex coordination things and be on Discord and have like not all this bureaucratic overhead and be able to coordinate to build a product or a service. They can't do it because they don't know if there's scammers in the Discord. All of these are identity problems that put a gigantic ceiling on the functionality of Web3. And so that's why it's super important what we're doing here to unlock that ceiling, break that ceiling for a lot of these interesting incentive mechanisms and game theoretical designs to flourish in a real way.
Gopal, that number you see ticking down, that's my fee. Like, I don't agree with this incentive system.
So technology is real, technology is here, metaverse is real. What we don't know is the adoption aspect. Number one, what we don't know, what I'm worried about, the disinformation and the misinformation and the hype that is going to lead us to the multiple futures that she was talking about, right? So technology is real. We don't know the adoption. We don't know where the future is going to lead us.
Heather, don't because she, no.
So I would say...
You're building real stuff, right?
We're building real stuff, and I think the things that everyone is doing in this room is the gateway drug into this spatial web, this next evolution, this immersive technology that we will live inside, that our kids are already living inside, and all of the things we've been trying to solve for decades past around identity, security, keys, fraud. Imagine all of that on speed, amplified, and they are the opportunities that we have for the next decade ahead in terms of the real things that we need to build and grapple with, yeah?
Thanks very much. Listen, I promise you, they'll tell you, they didn't know what questions I was going to ask them. They didn't know how I was going to frame it. They're not reading from pre-asked scripts. They gave you honest opinions from people who are really vested in this space. I hope you appreciated them as much as I did. Thank you very much.